Okay, welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting. Before the council meeting, we have a public forum and we have 4 speakers at the public forum. Before we start the forum, I'd like to welcome all the speakers and any other members who are supporting the speakers in the public gallery. I'd also like to advise you that the public forum is being recorded and recorded for records, and that it will be held in accordance with section 4 of the Code of Meeting Practice for councillors, staff and delegates. There's a high level of conduct expected during that process. Speakers will be given 5 minutes to present their position. Councillors may take the opportunity to ask speakers questions after their presentation. So I'll start with our first. I have 4 speakers. The first speaker is Ms. Susie Hardwick, and she's speaking in relation to item 13.1, camping ground, 2 amenities, buildings and removal of vegetation at Albury Showgrounds, 836 Mate Street, North Albury, of which Councillor Vandervan is now in the virtual waiting room. He has indicated a conflict, which I'll speak to at the start of the meeting. So her position is she supports the council recommendation. So, Ms. Hardwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You may remove your mask.
Thank you.
Batman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to address you tonight in support of the development proposed at the showground. My name is Susie Hardwick, and my family, through my father and now myself, have had a long involvement with the showgrounds over the last 60 plus years. In fact, the Harness Racing Club grandstand is named for my father in recognition of his contributions to the showgrounds. Firstly, I want to highlight and acknowledge the great working relationship the land manager has had with the Albury City Council over the last 10 years, culminating in the co-funding of the master plan which guides our development. Council is also value-adding to the roadwork project being undertaken in September, in which Council is the principal contractor and which is being financed by a grant received from Crown Lands. Camping is our major source of income. It will be the cornerstone of our sustainability into the future. Not only will it be a major source of income for the land manager, but also for the wider Albury community. Following surveys with campers that we did some time ago, the average spend per night by each camper at the showgrounds is between $100 and $140 per day, a great benefit to our entire community. Camping has been occurring at the showgrounds since at least 1948. It provides an ideal location for visitors to stay at a reasonable cost whilst exploring our area. It's just an unfortunate set of circumstances that has led to the redevelopment being necessary. Grant funding has already been secured for the entire project, so we would really like Council to support and approve the development and let us get on with the work, as there is a very strict timeline on the expenditure of grants received for this project. I'd also like to flag to you that we will be lodging an application shortly, seeking to have the infrastructure contribution for this development reduced to 0. Unfortunately, only one other member of our 5-member voluntary board is able to be here tonight to support the staff recommendation to approve this development. Henk van der Ven, as you may or may not know, is our current chairman and is not here tonight, well, not quite, as he has declared a conflict of interest for the forum and the discussion of the agenda itself. Thank you for your time, and I sincerely hope that you will approve our development application. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Hardwick. I have a question from Councillor Con. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question through you to the Speaker, if I may. I think a lot of people are looking forward to the amenities, etc., being formalised at the showground, and I certainly support that as well.
Definitely.
My question is just relating to the proposed removal of 4 trees that are, as per our staff, native trees in good health that are drought-tolerant species, and that looking at the plans, it looks like they're in an open area that's going to be part of the campground once the works are done. So my question was just as to the rationale for the tree removal, and was there any consideration to retaining them as part of the campsite? It, probably be better amenity for the campers to keep them.
There was consideration given to that. However, to retain those particular trees, which incidentally were planted by showground people, they're not original trees to the area. The decision was made that it would impact too heavily on the rest of the plans and we would have to revamp the whole thing. Our plan is definitely to incorporate quite a big landscape project in with this whole development and make it a much more attractive site for everybody, including the showground, the show people who come for the annual show, and that make it a much more pleasant area for them.
Thanks. Can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah.
There's a comment in the report that the staff are putting a condition on the approval tonight for some landscaping. So I'm pleased to hear that that's supported by the committee as well. And that was particularly about a buffer between the campsite and the dwellings to the west of the site. Are you saying that you're going to plant within the campsite area as well?
Currently, there's not a buffer between our neighbours, and our plan is to put a buffer of trees and make it more attractive from their side of the fence as well as our side.
Yeah. Okay, there appears to be no further questions. Thank you for your presentation. We'll just have Councillor Vanderman return via virtual. And just for the information of all our guests, we have Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Cameron and Councillor King on Zoom at the present time. Okay, PF 2.2 is Mr. Tom Barry, item 13.2. It's a development application for alteration additions to existing medical centre, car park extension and demolition of residence 807 and 799 Mate Street, North Albury. Supports the council recommendation. Thanks, Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for having me. My name is Tom Barry. I co-own O Health on Mate Street with my wife, Lisa. It's a family business and we've created it 16 years ago, and the growth has been quite extraordinary, and we're really proud of the contribution that we make to Albury, both from a health perspective, but also socially and economically and culturally. Tonight, I'm not going to speak to the planning law, simply I'm not qualified to do so, and far more qualified people than I've already done so in the report. What I'm hoping to do is just put a bit of context around it, around the essential nature of our service, the socio-economic benefits of businesses like ours, the safety of our patients, and also some other unique aspects of this DA. We are a clinic of physiotherapists, osteopaths, exercise physiologists, podiatrists, and exercise scientists. We operate in a converted warehouse on Mate Street. It's been beautifully presented and it's been built specifically for the purpose, and we're creating fantastic outcomes for our patients within it. We improve our community's health, both physically and mentally. We reduce the chronic health burden on the public health system through preventative care. And we have a strong focus on graded exercise-based approach to function and restoring people's quality of life. We provide much needed non-surgical care for the Albury-Wodonga district, and we have a lot of fun while we're doing it. We've made rehab and exercise as social and enjoyable as we possibly can, and Albury needs businesses like this. Beyond the obvious healthcare benefits, we also provide significant economic and social stimulus to Albury. We currently have 5 of our team building homes in the area. We've attracted 4 health professionals and their partners to the greater Albury-Wodonga region in the last 12 months alone, particularly during a COVID period. That's a fantastic outcome for Albury, and we continue to be a resource and draw patients into Albury from outlying areas. We have an incredible team of invested health professionals who contribute to the colour and diversity of Albury-Wodonga, whether it be in a sporting, cultural or economic context. And every community needs citizens like those that we employ, and we hope to continue attracting many of these great people to our community in the future. We appreciate that Mate Street is a challenge for council. For all intents and purposes, it functions as a commercial thoroughfare, but the nature of the businesses and the precedents that exist along this strip for car parking makes it kind of a bit of a troublesome child. The busyness of the dual lane road is both a blessing and a challenge for us. It creates significant exposure, but it is very challenging for our patients to have safe access in and out of our vehicles. We treat a wide range of patients, some of who have significant challenges with mobility and disability. And we can see that there are going to be issues around parking coming. We're trying to get on the front foot with this. The unique opportunity to take pressure off Mate Street and the surrounding neighbourhoods by having off-street car parking at considerable personal cost will prevent risk to these vulnerable people who seek care in our facility. This development will assist the public, the surrounding community, our patients and the Albury Council by offloading car parking on Mate Street. We understand the concerns that have been raised, but they relate to traffic issues down Bellevue Street, over which we have no control. The issue is more appropriately to be addressed by council's traffic management team. And at every step of this process, we've tried to do the right thing to improve the safety of our community and maintain the amenity of our neighbours within that North Albury enclave. In our planning, we identified sensitivity around some of these issues on Bellevue Street, and we took proactive steps to not have vehicles exit onto Bellevue Street, as well as with the landscaping we've got planned and those sorts of things. We want this to be an asset to the community. We are not here to take advantage of anyone, and we are simply trying to improve the amenity of both our facility and also the broader neighbourhood. Prior to O Health moving to Mate Street, it was a Bermuda Triangle for businesses with plenty of vacant buildings. We've assisted in the gentrification of this end of Mate Street, and it's been a very positive outcome for what has been an unsightly and challenging area for our community, and we're very proud of that. With the volume of traffic that Mate Street has, it will never truly be residential in spite of its zoning, and our business is exactly the type of enterprise that is allowed and should be encouraged to operate in this area. Our clinic is oriented entirely to Mate Street. We have no desire to face Bellevue Street, and we don't want any interaction with Bellevue Street. That is not our intent. Everything that we do is Mate Street facing. We've always thought of ourselves as an asset to the community. It is a well-maintained health facility with a respectful employee and customer base that operates at civilised hours. O Health is a fantastic business made up of fantastic people who are making Albury healthier. Our facility is unique, and we believe it to be entirely appropriate in its current location. We want the chance to keep our patients safe off Mate Street and improve access to our building and the broader amenity of the North Albury community. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Question, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that a lot of the submissions and feedback was about parking, especially Bellevue Street. How many staff do you have that would park at your facility every day?
Every day it depends on the shifts.
Yep.
There is somewhere between 10 to 12 people parking on site daily.
So that's almost your full car park.
We have 20, I need to look that up.
It's around about half.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And number of patient throughput per day?
Patients per day?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the realms of between 80 to 100.
Okay. And at the moment they park on Mate Street, your car park, and
Yep.
probably in Bellevue Street?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is not as many in Bellevue Street as you would think. They spread up and down Mate Street. It kind of causes issues for our neighbours, as in the commercial properties next door.
Thank you. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, can I ask a question of the relevant member of staff, please? Presumably Mr. Christie. It's in relation to Mr. Barry's comment about only intending to be Mate Street facing, and having read the submissions, there's a lot of concern about traffic potentially ending up coming in and out of Bellevue Street if in the future the car park were changed, and noting that when we determine a DA, that's not necessarily always going to be O Health. So taking into account the risk that your business might be sold or this clinic might be operated by someone else in future. My question to Mr. Christie is the conditions that we're placing on the car park in terms of only opening to Mate Street and not opening to Bellevue Street. Is that an agreement with O Health as a business, or is that a condition that would stay in perpetuity if the business changed hands?
Christie.
Yep. Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor. I was agreed that'll be a restriction on title. So there's a condition which is A7, which requires a restriction on title allowing no access out to Bellevue Street from what is currently 807 Mate Street, and that was put forward by the applicant and agreed to by council staff.
So to clarify, because it's on title, it would be in perpetuity even if the business was sold?
For you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. Yes, council is the only one who could agree to vary that, and that would have to be done through a normal process.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Any other questions, councillors? None on the screen? None in front of me. Thanks, Mr. Barry. Thanks for your presentation. Okay, our next speaker is Ms. Lorraine Webb. The item is 13.2, alterations and additions to existing medical centre car park extension, demolition of residence 807 and 799 Mate Street. And the position is doesn't support any recommendations. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. The O Health spin doctors would have you believe that O Health is a not-for-profit organisation who are this application and the 2019 application, this application and the 2019 application claim that this development is not considered traffic generating, which is not accurate. The original development consent of 2019 stated, the approved development must not adversely affect the amenity, the environment, or the neighbourhood in any way, but it is. And we have not been able to gain any traction with the council traffic department to remedy our concerns. The council traffic engineers look at the road infrastructure and networks. They are only interested in how the road is constructed and how many cars it is deemed capable of carrying. They do not consider the impact felt by the residents due to the increased traffic volume and speed. And if you have a look at the map, if you're not familiar with our location, the cars are the cars come out of O Health to exit after their appointments. They turn directly down Bellevue Street and they either continue straight through or they turn left down Frauenfelder, right down Smith Street, and then left onto Park and exit on the North Street exit. To get into Bellevue, to get into O Health, some people are sneaking around down Bellevue Street, turning right into Frauenfelder, left into either Smith Street or even Muntz Lane, which is tiny, and then sneaking around the front to Mate Street. And it causes considerable traffic in our tiny little village, unfortunately. There's also a habit of people trying to avoid the lights on the corner of North Street and the corner of, I can't even think of the old Sydney Road, but anyway, are going around those corners to avoid two sets of traffic lights. And they're using Smith, Frauenfelder and Park Avenues to avoid that traffic. Frauenfelder Street is actually known as Frauenfelder Speedway, by the way. Council Planning Department are only required to assess this application for the number of car parks against the number of consulting rooms on the premises. Their assessment does not have to factor in the number of customers attending a group class and these rooms, and the extra volume of traffic that those classes create. The traffic generated from businesses like this is likely to increase as a further amendment to the 2019 application has been given consent. And much like the application at hand, the majority of local residents that this affects were not aware of the application, nor did they have sufficient opportunity to object. Given the number of objections raised to this car park application, at short notice, it is hard to understand why the two applications would not have been considered to be interconnected and why notification was not provided to all those impacted on Bellevue and Frauenfelder Streets. So the council would have a better appreciation of the views of more residents. Having said that, I would like to offer a potential solution for residents, council and O Health and ask councillors to consider withholding consent for this application until the residents have satisfactory traffic applications physically in place. And I say physically to ensure that we are not dismissed by the traffic department again. Potential options include closing vehicle access to Bellevue Street and from Mate Street, no left turn into Bellevue Street from Mate Street, speed humps on Bellevue and Frauenfelder Streets, Park Avenue, Muntz and Polkinghorne Lanes, stop signs at intersections running east and west of Frauenfelder Street. I would also like to ask councillors to reconsider the start date for the consent of the application to increase hours of operation at O Health until traffic mitigation is in place so we can have peaceful enjoyment of our homes. Additionally, I would like to ask councillors, should you decide to consent to this application, to include in the demolition section of the consent that truck access is restricted to Mate Street and work is not to be conducted from Bellevue Street, Polkinghorne or Muntz Lanes. That the hours of operation do not include Saturdays and the demolition company provides some sort of form of dust mitigation for those living closest to the site. Thank you.
Councillor Thurley.
I've got a few. I'll start with my first one to Mr. Christie. it was the last issue about truck access for demolition. Would we impose, or is it part of the condition of consent that it would regulate how where trucks could go, where they could move, or would that be something we would do at a later stage?
Thank you for the question. And for you, Mr. Mayor, normally for the demolition of a single residence, which is a relatively minor demolition job compared to commercial, we wouldn't have put specific conditions along those requirements. There are still general requirements they do have to deal with in regards to dust mitigation and the like, but we wouldn't have generally on a demolition of a single dwelling have put those significant restrictions. Not saying that we can't in this instance, but it wouldn't be the normal process.
Just to follow up on that one then, given trucks in demolition are usually fairly big vehicles, them being on Bellevue Street would not be a good look, given that Bellevue Street's tree lined and all that sort of stuff. So we could do something with that.
Thanks for the question. And for Mr. Mayor, yes, if it was the wish of council, there's something we could utilise along those lines to address those concerns.
Yeah. A question to the presenter. A lot of what you've talked about is about traffic management in around Bellevue, Frauenfelder, Muntz Lane and so on. I guess if I look at the proposed development and they include more car parking, which stops car parking probably in Mate Street and get someone going around the corner into Bellevue, what you're asking is, and you've indicated that you're not particularly happy with our traffic people and their response, I think that some sort of comprehensive traffic management plan is really what's required, not as a result just of O Health, but this is a tight community with, residential streets, quiet streets, and we really need to do something about traffic management in those areas. So whether it's, chicanes, speed humps, all that sort of stuff. In fact, I was in Canberra on the weekend and I went to, I forget which suburb it was, but I had to drive at about 20 kilometres an hour. There were chicanes everywhere and they were very tight chicanes. So, it was difficult. So I think that what I'm asking our people, and I saw our Deputy CEO nodding his head, that we really do need to get stuck into traffic management in those areas.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Thurley has gazumped me. I've been on the local traffic committee for, 3 or 4 years and nothing's come up on any agenda regarding this area. And I was just going to suggest that Mr. Ferris get it onto the agenda for the next meeting, if at all possible.
Thanks, Mr. Ferris. Thanks, Councillor Stutchbury. Any other questions, councillors? Is that Councillor Vanderman putting his hand up, or is there a yellow T-shirt? You're on mute still, Councillor Vanderman.
No yellow T-shirt from me.
Okay, thank you. All right, just one question in relation to the current location of O Health. It used to be a warehouse for distribution, Actrol. Was that Actrol Refrigeration were there? And before that, there was Middies or someone like that?
Might have, there was some sort of air conditioning or some sort of factory like that, but there wasn't a lot of traffic coming out of there. Nothing like a retail business that this is. And to be honest, I don't think any of the neighbourhood has a problem with O Health. Like, it's a great service, but the impact that they're having on the neighbourhood is significant and no one will listen. So, and It's not about necessarily them coming out of the side onto Bellevue Street. It's actually they turn Mate Street and they come straight down, and it's all day. And I'm not sure that the 80 clients that they see is I can't see that would be correct if they have group classes.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to do a traffic count down there, but I just can't see how one business would create such a surge of traffic. But
it's not a surge, it's just constant, and it's speeding. And actually the other day I got beeped going to my own driveway because I slowed down. It may seem nothing to council, but it's actually quite inconvenient when you live there, and we actually didn't sign up for it. And all we're asking is that council do something about the traffic.
No problem. Okay. Thank you for your presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, the next presenter is Mr. Clark Watson. And he is speaking in relation to alterations, additions to existing medical centre, car park extension and demolition of residence 807 and 799 Mate Street. Mr. Watson, thank you.
Thanks for your time, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I fear I'll probably go over some of the same ground that Ms. Webb has, so I'll get through this quickly. Again, I'm opposed to the application based on the lack of forward movement regarding a permanent solution to what I believe is a dangerous traffic control problem in Bellevue Street. And we have raised it with council before without result. We've had traffic counters before. And on the principle, I am a client. My wife is a client of O Health. We believe it's a fabulous business. And I am pro-business in the area. I think it only adds to the livability and the prices. And I think it's a fabulous thing to have there. I think that this adds to an existing traffic problem. And so I want to use this platform to have it looked at, which I think we've spoken about. If I can very quickly bring up the map that was up there, Bellevue Street is a really obvious way to skip the lights. And most of the traffic that comes through is westbound. If you can see that Smith Street hits Park Ave and Stephen Street is blocked off with a concrete, you can't turn right into it. Bellevue Street is a really logical way to get from Mate Street to David Street by skipping the lights. Most of the traffic is westbound. In the last 8 months alone, we've experienced 3 high-speed police chases, one terminating outside 377 Bellevue Street due to children playing in the street, resulting in a near miss. We had a collision at high speed during a police chase on Bellevue Street and Frauenfelder intersection, crashing through the front fence of 815 Frauenfelder Street. And I've got the Border Mail article on that. That car came to rest a couple of feet away from a baby's bedroom, and it was covered in November 8th article, if anyone wants to look that up. A car lost control under braking while heading west, sliding broadside into an elm tree out the front of 806 Bellevue Street, another tree collision at 441 Bellevue Street, and a car was broadsided while parked outside my address as well. That's only what I've seen with my own eyes. That's not the cars that you hear flying down there late at night at speed. None of these accidents, to my mind and my understanding, are even possible if you're doing 50 k's an hour. You can't lose traction at that sort of speed and career into a house. And the problem is with such a long street, off the beaten track, it just invites speeding, and I think it's a real issue. I think in regards to O Health, I don't really think it's O Health's problem. But I think what it does do is it introduces other people to the street. It certainly will increase the traffic at some stage. And as a real estate agent, I feel like I've got a really good knowledge of the local streets in Albury, and I am yet to see another street with this kind of traffic problem. The advice I've been given from council when I've spoken to traffic management is that the road's for cars. But that argument will not wash if a kid gets skittled. That's not gonna do anything. Saying that there's joggers and people walking dogs, and even a footpath doesn't solve the issue. If a car leaves the road at 80 k's an hour and hits a house, the footpath won't solve it. So I think, as Councillor Thurley mentioned, I think chicanes, I think speed humps, perhaps even no left turn at the end of the street, no right turn, I should say. And maybe even having the end of the street blocked off would be a great option. But I do recognise that the fire station is there. So that may not be something we can look at. But I think we definitely need to examine it. We have had the traffic engineers put counters there. And their response was basically that the volume of traffic is in accordance with how the street's designed. I don't have a problem with the volume of traffic at all. I have a problem with the speed of the traffic, and I think that's what we have to try and stop. The other recommendation that I've got is to replace the giveaway sign on the Bellevue and Frauenfelder intersection with a stop sign, because people cross over Bellevue Street, or cross over Frauenfelder Street from Bellevue Street at speed, and there's been a couple of T-bones there. And in fact, that police chase that ended up in someone's house was that the police were chasing a car down Bellevue Street and they T-boned a car coming down Frauenfelder and pushed it into the northwest house on the corner. That pretty much covers. If we can look at the traffic situation, I'd be really happy.
Thanks, Mr. Watson. Questions, councillors? No? Councillor Vanderman, the yellow T-shirt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's a little bit unfortunate that the last two speakers have had to use a development application of what I believe to be a pretty sound, proposal to highlight the traffic issues. So I think there's a clear message there that maybe we need to, as Councillor Thurley said before, need to have a look at this situation. But we've had other issues, which I was going to bring up when we do the local traffic committee minutes, about enforcement and those sorts of issues, and it just doesn't seem to get any traction. So, as I said, it's unfortunate that these presenters have had to use this particular forum. I don't think there's anything wrong with this development application. It's just unfortunate they've had to use this opportunity to highlight some clear traffic issues. I think it's quite clear where we need to go from here.
Was there a question in any of that, Councillor Vanderman?
No, I wanted to just make the comment, Mr. Mayor, and I don't have a comment shirt.
The question that I would like to ask Mr. Watson is, if you put chicanes in Bellevue Street, where do you stop? I'll just use Stephen Street or Buckingham Street.
Yeah, that's a great question. The difference is, and it's a fair question, is if you come down Mate Street, you can't turn into some of these streets. Bellevue Street, Buckingham Street's a bit early because you haven't reached the lights yet.
Yeah.
Stephen Street and Smith Street, you can't get through the end. So you come through Smith Street, you hit Frauenfelder and Park Ave. So Bellevue Street just seems to be the obvious choice.
So that you shift it from Bellevue to Stevens. From
That is when we had the meeting in O-Health, that was a concern that came up. Some people said if you blocked off the end of Bellevue Street, that fixes my problem. But maybe it would move the problem to Muntz Lane or to Smith Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Bellevue and Smith will both suffer the same problem.
Yeah.
But I think without being dramatic, it's an accident, a massive accident waiting to happen.
No, I've just seen what we've had to do up on Gap Road, and that has had a myriad of implications and impacts. And every time you shut something off, you open up another corridor.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you create ant trails where there weren't ant trails before. So you might satisfy the residents of Bellevue Street, which I don't disregard what you're saying, because I sympathise with that situation. But then they shift to Stephen Street, and then they shift to Buckingham Street. But as you say, what happens at the end in David Street is what they're probably chasing.
And you're talking about volume. You're talking about shifting the volume. If you block Bellevue Street off, obviously the volume of traffic has to go somewhere, and I accept that. But it's not the volume that really concerns the residents. It's the speed. It's the speed that's going to kill somebody.
Two parts: it's behaviour and it's
and look, we've had the police down there putting up signs and on the spot, but it's a much bigger problem than that.
No worries. Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Watson. Thank you for all the presenters this evening, and thank you for your information. And it has been heard, and certainly in relation to the last two speakers, the traffic matters are recognised. I haven't been made aware of anything like this in my 9 years of council. I don't think anyone else who has either, but now we're aware of it. Hopefully we can address it and see what we can do to try and make it a little bit more livable in that precinct. Okay, so that brings us to our council meeting, and I must stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement of country. Thank you. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us in the community we see from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. Okay. Must inform you that this meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting, that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations received by the chair and disclosure of political donations. I have one from Councillor Vandervan, non-pecuniary significant, Brief description. I am the current president of the land manager of the Albury and land manager of the Albury Showgrounds, who have a DA before council this evening. It is an ordinary council meeting, CM 13.1, camping, DA 10.2020.37642.1. The action is leave the chamber or in the virtual chamber, be put in the virtual room and not participate in the item or the community forum of which Councillor Vanderman hasn't. Mr. Ferris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just advice to the council meeting. The Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, section 10.4 requires a person submitting a planning application or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donations and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reported political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on council's website or from the customer service centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the council chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific planning matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of section 4151 of that Act are set out in the council officer's report detailing planning issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decisions mean a decision made in the exercise of the function of council under the Environment Planning and Assessment Act 1979, including a decision relating to a development application, environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under the Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Apologies, we're all accounted for. There are no apologies. There is no Merrill minute. CM6 action plans. Thanks, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the following action plans be received and noted. 1, actions complete for noting only. 2, actions awaiting response from external parties. 3, actions in progress, and 4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you. Councillor Gluckin.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
I have a number of questions, and depending on what happens, I may seek to amend the motion that we receive and note. However, my first one is to Mr. Christie, and it relates to the draft cultural precinct master plan. We've got the 3 A, B, C, but there was a D and an E in that part. And what I'm concerned about is that if we proceed with these 3 parts without looking at the built form, so Taylor, Cullerty, Lethlean only looked at the buildings on the eastern side of the square. They did not look at any buildings in detail on the western side or even on the southern side, so the old courthouse, the post office, Bellbridge Hague, St Matthews. So if we proceed with this, the cultural precinct master plan as already developed by Taylor, Cullerty, Lethlean, are we locking ourselves into something that we limit our opportunities when we look at the built form of these other buildings?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe we are. The second phase of the CBD review is the overall review of the CBD master plan, and that prior is what we used in 2009 to come up with the controls and guidelines for development within the CBD, and there's some areas that are precinct based and generally based. So I believe it would be most appropriate that as we review the CBD master plan, which is in this current financial year, that the information that comes out of the cultural precinct master plan, should it be adopted by council, would one form part of that review. And then secondly, the outcomes of that overall review would then lead to a review of development control plan controls, which cover the development within the CBD district. Also from a planning perspective, once council does adopt the master plan, it does become an item that is considered during any development application. So should an application come in during the process that we were considering the review of the master plan and going on to development controls, then any identities or any issues identified in this master plan, any outcomes, guidelines, etc., would be relevant consideration for any development application in that interim period.
And just a quick follow-up, I noticed in the actions taken at the end, it is anticipated that this will be reported back to council at the 26th of July. Is that a definite or hopeful?
As of about half an hour ago, I provided some feedback on the report. To this stage, we still are planning the 26th of July. We're just finalising the consideration of the more than 40 submissions and make certain that we appropriately address all the issues raised, and also can provide a little bit of a feedback on items D and E, as you identified that we're saying there's further work past this report, past this master plan. So make certain there's some information around that.
Thank you. And I have another question, which I asked at the last time this came up at the last council meeting. The draft either collection policy, have we received feedback from Heritage New South Wales? And if so, what has resulted from that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Squire.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks for the question. Yes, we have received the feedback from Heritage New South Wales. They didn't seek any major amendments to the draft policy. So there'll be a report to council for the 26th of July representing that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Done. Any other questions? Any other discussion? No, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We've got the green T-shirt happening there. Okay, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday, the 28th of June, 2021. Thank you, councillors.
I can go if you like.
Yep, off you go, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, the 28th of June at 6 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you, Councillor Glucken.
Happy to second.
Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Thank you.
There being no question or debate, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Confirmation, reports, community forums, there are none. There are no matters of rescission or other motions. We have no presentation of deputations. Reports and minutes of committees and working parties. 11.1 minutes of the Les O'Brien Athletics Precinct Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 9th of June, 2021. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley, you're the lone wolf here at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the council receives notes and accept the minutes and recommendations of the Les O'Brien Athletics Precinct Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 9th of June, 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
I wasn't at the meeting, so I really have nothing to say about this one.
Thank you. I was at the meeting, but there was nothing noteworthy, so I'm happy to move that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. CM 11.2 minutes of the local traffic committee held on Thursday, the 24th of June, 2021. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council receives notes and accepts the minutes and recommendations of the local traffic committee meeting held on Thursday, the 24th of June, 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to speak to that at all?
There wasn't much on the agenda that was worthy of major discussion this evening, I don't think.
Okay, I've got a question from Councillor Vanderman, yellow T-shirt. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to item LTC 2.3, I noticed in my emails that there's a long letter to the CEO in regards to that issue, and I'm just wondering if I can get an update from staff as to where we're up to with this, because there doesn't seem to be a satisfactory resolution, even after all of the traffic counts and the identified problems that even council officers have noted.
Mr. Ferris.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, LTC 2.3 is the Homeward Cross vehicle restriction. So we've undertaken a in-depth study of that area and the vehicle speeds and going the wrong way in the one-way laneway at the Poole Street end. That was discussed at local traffic and it was decided to defer it. The police suggested that they could increase their surveillance in that area and try and achieve a satisfactory result with that. prior to bringing in some hard infrastructure that would stop traffic flow altogether through there. So it was a removable bollard would need to be placed there. It would remain in place. We would need to make it removable for access for the garbage trucks, etc. But generally it would remain closed from through vehicle traffic, still allow foot traffic through there.
Councillor Vanderman?
Follow up, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you for that answer, but I, as indicated with the other the public forum issue around the traffic speeds, etc. Well, I don't think we're going to get a decent result out of this. So I wonder, have council staff considered, you know, that they put these one-way, they're sort of like a grate that if you go the wrong way, you'll shred your tyres, and if you go the right way, it just pushes the thing down. I'm just wondering if that's been considered as a possible option for to mitigate the traffic or to stop the traffic going the wrong way down that street.
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that particular treatment, no, that hasn't been considered at length, but there were a number of considerations in closing it completely and having a bowl on the end of Homewood Cross. But in the interim, for a small cost, we could put a bollard, a removable bollard. However, as I suggested before, the police were keen to try enforcement with some education, and hopefully we can alleviate the issue without any hard infrastructure in place.
Yeah, can I just have a further follow-up? In terms of then what the police action is going to involve, can we get an update on what they've done and what their results are in terms of their education and enforcement procedures to see what impact it has? Now, obviously, it's not working at the moment because that letter only came in, I think, in the last day or so.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that item will be on the agenda for LTC in August. The police are going to provide us some feedback there, and we can represent the report with additional information from the police.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. No further questions or debate? No. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Documents for sealing, CM12, there are none. CM13, 13.1, development application 10.2020.37642.1, camping ground, 2 amenities, buildings and removal of vegetation, Albury Showgrounds, 836 Mate Street, North Albury. Councillor Vandervan is in the virtual waiting room. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A receives the contents of this report and B grants consent to development application 12/2020-37642.1 for additional use being staged development for a camping ground, 2 amenities buildings, alteration to a laundry block and tree removal, subject to the conditions contained in the draft determination included at attachment 6 to this report.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Very happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just open debate on that item.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, this seems to have been a very neglected part of our city for a very long time, and it's often very busy and very used by a number of groups. So I think that this represents a great opportunity to liven that space up, to improve its visual appearance, and to really make it something a little more attractive than it presently is.
Thank you. Any further questions or debate, councillors? No? Okay. I'm happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Stutchby, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Conn, Councillor Blacken, Councillor Thurley, Councillor Cameron and Councillor King. The motion is carried. We'll welcome Councillor Vanderman back to the... Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, you're online. Okay. The next item is CN 13.2, which is a development application 10.2021.38310.1 alterations, addition to existing medical centre car park extension, demolition of residence 807 and 799 Mate Street, North Albury. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. To move the recommendation as a motion that Council A receives and notes the contents of this report, and B grants development consent to development application 10.2021.38310.1, proposing the demolition of existing dwelling and construction of a car park on the subject site, described as Lot B, DP 153681807 Mate Street, North Albury, and Lot 100, DP 1259827, 799 Mate Street, North Albury, subject to the conditions contained in the draft development determination included as attachment 5 to this report, and C, council undertake work to ascertain the traffic levels and speeds along the two streets, which were Bellevue and the one north of Bellevue. Is it Stephen Street?
Don't know whether that's a lawful part of the recommendation at this point. Mr. Christie?
Actually, no, I think you're right, and we can follow up later with that. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fine. We can follow up with that because it's not attached.
Ramona's A and B?
development. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Happy.
Councillor Vandervan, you got your green up?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the motion items A and B.
Thank you. Happy to take a question first, Councillor Buchan.
No, I don't have a question.
No, Councillor Con has a question. Happy for me to call out and debate. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Con.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Not a question. I had an amendment. I actually had an alternative part C that I'd like to move for consideration of the mover and seconder, please. Part C, that council officers prepare in consultation with local residents a plan to reduce speeds on surrounding residential streets, and that this plan be reported to councillors in no greater than 6 months' time.
Mr. Mayor, I don't accept that amendment. It doesn't need to be. I think the council staff are well aware of the issues around the traffic here, and it can just be done at the normal course by our staff.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Yes, as the same reason as I withdrew the suggestion of an alternative offering C.
Okay, so the response is no.
Doesn't fit with this.
Okay, Councillor Con, did you wish to offer as an amendment, or did you wish to move it as an amendment? Councillor Con moving the item part C as an amendment. Seconder, Councillor Thurley.
Oh, I'm sorry, my button's been.
Okay. Councillor Cameron's Con's moving this amendment as part C. I've got a seconder, please. Anyone?
Move on, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon?
Move on, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, there doesn't appear to be any second. I'm happy to allow the amendment to lapse. Councillor Glacken, can you open debate, please?
Thank you. Yes, we've heard a lot of information tonight, and we've had a number of submissions against this development theoretically. And even tonight, it was agreed by or volunteered, in fact, by at least one speaker very openly, that it's not really necessarily the development that is creating many of the issues that they're experiencing along Bellevue Street. And it was acknowledged that there were other streets in this proximity that also have some undesirable traffic issues. So the speeding and the car chasing is not necessarily directly related to this business. And I'd be quite surprised if it was directly related to this business. And so I think that needs to be dealt with in a separate way. I was going to suggest a part C to this motion, but agreed, yes, it's not directly related to this development. Therefore, we should deal with that in a different way. It is an unfortunate set of circumstances, and I do entirely feel for the people of that community in that area of North Albury who have experienced such terrible traffic incidents in their locality. It's not unusual, however, for that to happen in a number of streets and a number of areas, which is why council only recently, in fact, I believe it was last week, announced that we were having a have your say on what streets are dangerous or the community believes are dangerous or people are speeding along. This is one of those locations where clearly people think that there is speeding and undesirable traffic conditions. I'm not convinced that they will be resolved by putting speed humps in. I don't think putting the stop sign at the corner of Bellevue and Fronfelder will really stop those police chases, because I doubt very much that the speeding motorists would stop at the stop
Point
sign.
of order, Mr Mayor. Are we talking about a development application or traffic issues here?
Thank you, Councillor Vanderven.
And acknowledging the concerns of the people who do live in those surrounds and have raised these as legitimate concerns as to why they didn't think, in their belief, that they didn't think this development should go ahead. I think it's important that we as a council deal with those issues raised, but that we do that as a separate process. This development is good for Albury because it allows that business to try and house the parking generated from their business on a site that they would then control and manage. And I think that's really proactive by this business. So we should be supporting them, not only because they're a business that's growing and developing, but a business that are seeing that they need to support their community and their local community in particular. So I believe that we should be supporting this development and dealing with the traffic concerns that even Councillor Vanderven very early on, when the presentations were being made, raised as a concern himself. So I support this recommendation for this development application.
Thank you, Councillor Gluckin. Now, Speaker for Councillor Vanderven.
Thanks. Very briefly, Mr Mayor, this is a good development application. People in the community understanding that they've got some issues with parking around the vicinity of this particular business and doing something about it. So I think that this development application needs to be supported. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you've taken your button off. Okay. Are there any further speakers for or against? Councillor Gluckin, did you wish to close debate?
No, that's fine.
Okay. On that note, I'm happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour, Councillor Stutchby, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor Gluckin, did you have your hand up? Yep. Councillor Thurley, Councillor Vanderman, Councillor Cameron and Councillor King. Bit fuzzy up there, Councillor King, but yep, got it. Yes, thank you. Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, 13.3, the Albury Riverside Precinct Construction number 20/02769. Thank you, councillors. We've got any councillors moving? Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that council accepts the tender from XL Grade Brunei Proprietary Limited contract number 20/02769, the Albury Riverside Precinct for the lump sum amount of $8,744,120, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchby.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, Mr Mayor. It's been raised frequently by other councillors that we have within our city one of the most beautiful riverside precincts. And I'd have to say, when I moved here, it was a caravan park. And now we've opened it up to the citizens of Albury, and it's a fantastic place to go. Go down there on any fine weekend day, and the place is absolutely packed. And this Riverside Precinct work involved in this construction contract will only enhance it and really bring, I think, a lot of people wanting to walk and see what we've got here in this city. So I commend this.
Thank you. Any further speakers for or against? No? Okay. All right. So I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, 13.4 Centaur Road reconstruction, Overend Street to Mud Street, contract number 20/02903. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving an alternative motion to the recommendation, please. That Council 1 postpone the awarding of a tender for contract number 20/02903 Centaur Road reconstruction Overend Street to Mud Street, and 2, consider alternative designs to reduce environmental risk, in particular impact on hollow-bearing trees, including but not limited to alternative road alignments or revised project scope omitting road widening.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Con, would you like to open debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm moving the alternative motion tonight as a result of the information we've been provided with the review of environmental factors since the last time this item came to council. And I first want to note that I guess this road reconstruction does need to be done. I'm not trying to argue that it doesn't need to be done. It's an important road, and I also support adding telecommunications infrastructure out to the Waste Management Centre. But I do have serious concerns as a result of the review of environmental factors. We were initially told that 9 trees were being cleared for this project, and then it was revised to 18 trees. We've now been made aware that 98 trees, in fact, are at risk as a result of this project, and 46 of those are native, and that 4 hollow-bearing trees will be lost, 2 from direct clearing and 2 indirectly as a result of incursion into the tree protection zone. This council is well aware of the importance of hollow-bearing trees. We provide ratepayers funding in the form of grants to the Albury Conservation Company to find them and map them. We've had a presentation from Professor David Watson in this term of council about the importance of those trees, and we're undertaking a review of the Part 5 of the DCP at the moment to improve protection for hollow-bearing trees. So I probably don't need to bang on about that point tonight. What I'd like to focus on from the review of environmental factors is that no alternatives were considered for this design. So if you look in the detail of the report, there was the option of carry out all the works as planned versus do nothing. And what I'd really like to see is a consideration of alternatives, and particularly whether this entire project can be carried out just omitting the road widening. That's my understanding that that's the most significant risk being posed to the trees. And I'd like to ask staff to seriously consider whether the road can be reconstructed with drainage works, curb, gutter, telecommunications, but without widening, because that might have the potential to retain at least 2 of the 4 hollow-bearing trees. If this project were put to us by an external developer, these are the sorts of questions that we would ask them. In this term of council, we've asked developers to revise DAs to retain significant trees, or to provide a significant detailed justification as to why those trees have to be removed. And the same standards should apply even when this is our own project.
Thank you, Councillor Con. A speaker against, Councillor van der Ven.
This should come as no surprise to Councillor Con. The issue for me here is that the waste management service that we have and that we've spent a huge amount of money on over the last 10 to 15 years is world leading, nation leading in terms of what we're managing to do out there. To have really poor access to this particular site is just doesn't make any sense. I think it's quite clear from the report that there's very little evidence that the hollow-bearing trees present any opportunity for threatened species to inhabit those hollow-bearing trees. And in fact, the offsets for the trees, so I think there's 460 planned, are more than enough to offset what's being lost. I think the native trees that are being lost are being replaced 10 to 1. So from that perspective, I think that it satisfies my requirements. I foreshadow, Mr. Mayor, that should this motion fail, that I will be moving the original motion. On top of that, I really need to remind Councillor Con that she lives on a street where there's a decent road. She lives on the street where I'm presuming that Councillor Con generates rubbish. I presume that she's got a reasonable street to.
Councillor
to live on.
Stutchbury has a point of order, Councillor Vanderman. Councillor
go on.
Stutchbury.
We're discussing Centaur Road, not North Street. I think that Councillor Vanderman is out of order, attacking Councillor Con's street when Councillor Con's street doesn't form any part of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Yeah, I think we need to confine ourselves to the issues at hand, Councillor Vanderman.
Mr. Mayor, it was a generalisation, not specific, a generalisation that Councillor Con generates waste and has it dealt with by the Waste Management Centre. And I think people that service the Waste Management Centre, in terms of our community, are entitled to have a safe road access to that community, which is really to that facility, which is really important to our community. So I offer that in terms of your point of order ruling.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do speak in support of this motion. I was surprised when reading the review of environmental factors that we were offered two options: complete all the works or do nothing. I think there is an opportunity to, and here I would agree with Councillor Vanderman that we have a world-class waste management centre and we need the road to be in good shape and so on. But it doesn't need to be, it just needs the paved surface, the curb and guttering to be done, and we have a high quality road. I don't believe that it needs to be widened. If you go west of Overend Street, there's not a lot of traffic in that from there on. Most of the traffic is prior to that because it's going into the housing estates. After that, there are a few houses further up and we have vehicles moving to and from the waste management facility. But we do not need a 2-lane with bike lanes and the whole works here. We can have a high quality road and preserve the natural bushland and what's there. It's irrelevant to me whether it's habitat for a threatened species or not. It's native bushland that's mature trees. Yes, we can go and plant another 400 trees, as the corporation did way back, and we saw heaps and heaps of immature trees planted all over the place. And in my 2 and a bit terms of council, we've managed to knock a fair few of those down because they were not properly planned and so on. I don't believe that doing this project, we can improve the quality of the road. We don't have to do the widening, which impacts on a whole heap of other things. And I assume that that would also come at a lower cost to council.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Question from Councillor Glacken. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. My memory is that it has been proposed for some time that ultimately there would be an access road that would come from Splitters Creek over and end up somewhere in this proximity. Is it in some proximity to this street that we are talking about today?
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Previously, we've undertaken some studies, and this is dating back probably a decade or so, Councillor Glacken, around alternate access to the Albury Waste Management Centre. Those studies didn't identify a suitable route to join up either from Splitters Creek or from Greater Hume Shire. And it was determined at the time that Centaur Road would be the primary access to the Albury Waste Management Centre.
And follow up, please. Was there also some discussion about opening up access to the top end of Splitters Creek, noting fire hazard risk, etc., that there would be a top access to over the top access to Splitters Creek? Was that not correct or not? Not just for the garbage access. Yeah.
Mr. Ferris or Mr. Christie?
Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr. Mayor. I believe you may be talking, Councillor Glacken, as part of the rural land strategy, which did consider fire egress and access from Splitters Creek as part of its considerations. So there was some investigation at that stage done about whether extending Splitters Creek Road up and over to connect to Centaur Road was feasible, and it was determined that it wasn't feasible. If there's alternate access, it was going to consider coming out to Griffith I believe it's Griffith Bradford, coming out as an alternate access to Riverina Highway, rather than trying to come up across over the hill to Centaur Road. So it was considered as part of the rural land strategy. That may be your recollection.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gluckin. Councillor Vanderman, do you have a question?
I do, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the people that have tendered for this project, if we go back and go to do alternative designs, are these people going to be recompensed for the time and trouble that they've spent to provide the quotations for this particular tender?
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically in these situations, depending on the time it takes to review the design, we would go back to the tenderers and seek if their tender price and conditions held. And if it did, we would represent with the current. If it didn't, we would come back to council and suggest alternatives depending on the responses, which could be a retender, just depending on the timeframes it takes.
Mr. Mayor, just to follow up, I haven't got an answer to my question. Are the people that have tendered for this project now, if we change the designs, are they going to be recompensed for the time and trouble that they've gone to tender for these projects?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we certainly don't fund contractors preparing or amending their tender submissions. If the change in design changes the scope, those items could be done through a separate process, or they could be done through a variation process. But if they're significant and they change the scope, then we would need to re-advertise with a new scope.
Again, Mr. Mayor, I have not received an answer to my question.
Mr. Ferris has said they wouldn't be compensated for their time.
Well, then is that fair? I asked the question, is that fair? If we're going to change the scope of this tender.
Yes, Councillor Stutchbury.
And has gone completely off topic here, and he's badgering the Deputy CEO, and he's asking a series of pointless questions, which are not contributing in any valuable way to the debate.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not badgering the Deputy CEO. I am not badgering anybody. And he is actually the acting CEO at tonight's meeting. I am seeking to be fair in this process, that if we're going to change the designs, right, it's only fair that people who've in good faith tendered for this project should be recompensed for the time and trouble that they've gone to provide tenders for this project. That's my only issue.
So I think from where we sit, though, unless there's policy before council creating that as an option for future tenders, then I think that is a moot point. I think we need to move on with this. Thanks, Mr. Ferris. Thanks, Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Stutchbury, you wish to speak to this motion? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this road reconstruction has been a bit of a fraught topic. When it was first presented to us a month or so ago, there was no review of environmental factors, which pretty clearly was needed, because now that we see the review of environmental factors shows that 4 hollow-bearing trees and a number of other native trees are at risk. And it's of some concern to me that, as stated by Councillors Thurley and Con, council staff haven't offered any options other than to do the job as presented or to do nothing. And clearly doing nothing should not be on the table as an option, because this road does require reconstruction. And none of the councillors supporting Councillor Con's amendment don't want the road to go ahead. Of course, we want it to go ahead, but we want to get it to go ahead in a way that causes least damage to the environment, and in particular causes no loss of hollow-bearing trees, which I think most of us accept are a pretty important part of our natural environment. So my thoughts are that this road reconstruction gets the relevant redesign that it needs, so that we have some more options to choose from when it's next brought to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. I've got a speaker against, but just two questions from me, Mr. Ferris, just some clarification. In relation to the grant that was provided by the New South Wales State Government from the Fixing Local Roads program, what is the time frame in relation to its completion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we received notification of the 1.54 million in May this year, and we have 2 years to expend the funds, albeit it had to qualify, it had to be shovel ready, which this was reasonably close to shovel ready. So they're encouraged to do it as quickly as possible, albeit we have a 2-year window to expend the funds.
The second part of the question, Mr. Ferris, is in relation to the design of the road. At what point was it determined the width of the road needed to be, and why was it determined as to be that width?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the process we followed was there were a number of options explored early on when developing concepts before we get into putting resources into detailed design. So we worked both with our internal and external stakeholders around how we could meet all the demands of the road. So the road design is at 11 metres width. It's 9 at the moment, so it's about a 2 metre wide extension. That's based on the type of traffic we're receiving on that road, with in particular vehicles, heavy vehicles going to the waste management centre and them coming through a curve that's a hairpin curve and difficult to manoeuvre. So early in the design phase, we work on concepts. We worked up a number of options there and trying to meet the demands, trying to minimise the environmental impact, trying to meet the current requirements around suitable width for heavy vehicle traffic being 11 metres, and making that curve better, as well as some drainage around that area that's below standard, with a lot of erosion issues, etc. So all of those issues were worked through to come to a preferred concept. And yes, the REF talks about either do this or not do the project at all. But I suppose all the options work was done at the forefront before we got into detailed design. There's those two hollow bearing trees that they're right on the edge of the road at the moment. They're just west of Overend Street before the major drain there. To move that road over, it falls away very quickly. So there wasn't an opportunity to move it further to the north and clear of those trees. So they present a road safety issue at the moment, as well as being in the alignment of the new road.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you have a question? You've turned yourself off.
Hopefully, I do, Mr. Mayor. I hope I don't get any points of order with this one.
Okay.
The budget allocation for this project is 2.31 million, and we've received funding contribution from 1.54. Can I get an explanation of how the funding will be apportioned? Will the grant funding provide all of the money, and then the balance of the money on the quoted price? Let's hypothetically that we go ahead at some stage with the quoted price. Will the difference between the grant funding and the budgeted price be refunded to New South Wales Government, or will it be done in proportion of the amount of money that we're putting into the project?
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Mr. Ferris?
Yeah, through you again, Mr. Mayor. So the price quoted in the document today is for a component of the project. We'll have project management costs and the revegetation works that we'll undertake ourselves, etc. So I'll need to take on notice the proportional split with regard to the funding application, but certainly our intent will be to use all the funding money in the first instance.
Councillor Vanderman, comfortable with that?
Just a quick follow-up. In the report that follows, then can we get detailed the costs associated with those other items or those other elements of this project that Mr. Ferris just alluded to, so we can have a full understanding of the total cost of this project, and also then about the funding allocation and who's going to pay for what, and whether any money is going to go back to New South Wales government if the proportion of funding is applied to this project.
Thank you. Mr. Ferris, happy to take that on notice and provide that information.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Certainly
Thank
will.
you. Councillor Glacken, speaking against.
Yes, speak against this motion that we postpone the work and call for a resubmission of how the road would be built, to build it in a different way. I think we should move ahead with this. I voted that we should move ahead with this last time. One of the councillors, I can't remember, it's Councillor Con or Councillor Vanderman, probably Councillor Vanderman, said that it's a very important road and that the road was in poor condition. It is a very important road because it really services aspects for not only just Albury, but Albury and its surrounding district because of what is at the moment at the pretty much at the end of that road, and that is our waste facility, which services very much our regional community. But it's not just that the road is in poor condition. It is also primarily, from my perspective, that the road is at the moment dangerous. And in part of the answering of a question earlier, Mr. Ferris raised the issue we have of a couple of large trees right on the side of that road at the moment. And that is one of the reasons why it's not possible for staff to necessarily find a different route. The route is what it is. The aim of the staff, and my personal aim, is to widen that road to make it safer, to rework that road, but also to actually applaud the inclusion of the proposed shared pathway in this development, because part of this road, or this road leads to, just before the waste facility, the top end of Nail Can Hill, the northern end of the Nail Can Hill walk and area. People ride their bicycles along that area. Clearly people want to access that, and this is a safe way for those people to access it. We have councillors on a fairly regular basis trying to encourage us to have cycleways and open up cycleways around the city. This is one of those opportunities that we have now to do so. So I cannot understand why we would not be supporting this redevelopment as suggested by the staff and as being put to us tonight as a tender to be able to undertake this work. We've been given funding. The work has been needed to be done for some time. It enhances the road and it also makes it safer. This is a significant road for our community, and I support us going ahead with this tonight. So I cannot support this alternative motion put up by Councillors Con and Councillor Sutcliffe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Are there any further speakers for or against?
Speaker for, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor King.
Yeah, look, my thoughts on this is the tender process. This stinks. The tender was let out. The tender is put in for a scope of works. We were told by the council staff that they'd do some modification. The modification has now turned into 90 trees that are being affected. People who would have put in for this tender or not put in for it would have seen the scope of works. The tenderers for this project were hundreds of thousands of dollars apart. Now there's an opportunity for the winning tenderer to say, well, hang on, that wasn't in there, this wasn't in there, that wasn't in there. And we could be setting ourselves up for another DPAN 4. I voted against it. I spoke against it last time. This has not been a stellar performance on behalf of the Albury City Council staff. and also a couple of comments directing costs angling towards Councillor Con. And I applaud her for raising this motion. She's gone through the fine detail. She's found that there's discrepancies. There's found that there's misinformation that was presented to us. She's raised it, good on her, and congratulations. And it's all about integrity. You know, this council is a council of integrity. It's not about cobbling things together, about tweaking things after it's already done. It's about integrity. So I'm voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Any other further speakers or questions? There doesn't appear to be any. Just to finish up on this particular motion, I have taken it on notice from the balance of debate and the discussion that has been had in the chamber this evening about this particular project. The project is something that is necessary and does have merit, and certainly is a regional road for the purpose of our waste and the importance of getting to and from the waste facility. The width of the road, yes and no. I think at 9.5 metres probably meets a standard that is suitable. My view, and my view only, at 11 metres might encourage faster driving. However, for the behest or the loss of faster driving, we lose a lot of trees. And I think, again, the changes in the refs report are quite alarming. I don't support Councillor King's position that the staff have got it wrong. I think it's just one of those issues where the completed report has indicated that there are extra impacts upon the environment. And I think, again, it's not about abandoning this project. It's about actually making it a little bit more appeasable to, and the balance of that, the environment and development. And the second part in relation to our development application process and the way we perceive or approach that or apply that to our developers, I don't see that we're contradicting that in this project. I think, again, the balance is that we are trying right now to amend that process and see what is the best possible outcome by a process of debate and a process of redesign. And I think, again, I think at times we need to reassess and approach things from a different perspective. So on that note, I think we have the time, we have the opportunity, we should make the most of that opportunity right now. In relation to the hollow bearing trees question being a traffic hazard, that would be in relation...
Mr Mayor, I move the motion be put.
That would be in relation to applying
Mr Mayor, I've
safety
asked that the
treatments on
motion
that
be
road.
put.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderven. I'm putting the motion. I didn't know you were chairing the meeting.
I'm
Thank you,
allowed to
Councillor
move
Con.
that the
Could you
motion be
please-
put, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Con is closing debate, Councillor Vanderven.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like
Mr Mayor, I need you to
Councillor
rule.
Vanderven, I have denied your motion that the motion be put. Please desist. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr.
Point of
Mayor.
order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Vanderven.
No, Councillor Cameron has got a
Councillor
point of order.
Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The point of order is that when a motion to put a motion, that a motion be put is moved, it must be dealt with and voted on, and you all ruled on and then voted on if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Happy to vote on that. Those who wish to vote on the motion to be put, raise their hand. Thank you. We have 2, those who wish to vote, or 3, those that wish to vote that we continue with the current debate, raise their hand. Those against the motion to be put. Well, that is lost, Councillor Vanderven. We will continue with the debate. Councillor King put up a vote against Councillor Blacken, for the motion to be put.
It was a no, was it?
Yeah. Councillor King, can you verbalise what your response was?
Continue the debate, please.
Continue with the debate. So you are
Against
actually
Councillor
voting for the motion not to be
Vanderven.
put. Thank you.
Of
Thank
course.
you, Councillor Blacken. Thank you, Councillor Con. Can you please continue and complete the debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would appreciate the opportunity to respond to the points raised that are relevant, and where I live is certainly not one of those. I'm very proud of the Albury Waste Management Facility, as are we all. And I'm proud of it because we've shown leadership on sustainability. We've innovated, we've led other councils, we've halved our waste to landfill, and we're taking New South Wales with us. As a council that leads and pays attention to sustainability, all I'm asking is that we pay the same level of attention and care to the road that goes out there. And I have no doubt that the road will be upgraded within the 2 years that we've got to expend the grant money. To Councillor Glacken, as someone who personally runs along Centaur Road to access Nelcan Hill, I'm quite happy for that upgrade to be postponed for this work to be done properly. Roadside reserves have really high environmental value, and particularly a roadside reserve that directly abuts Nelcan Hill, which is really so precious to us. I appreciate the comments from Mr. Ferris that options were considered early in the process. But unfortunately, that was when the preferred option, we were under the impression that only 9 trees would be lost. And I think now with the information that in fact 98 trees will be lost, 46 of which are native and 4 of which are hollow bearing, it really does behoove us to go back to reconsider some of those options. I hope that when this comes back to council, we can make a really informed decision that if those trees have to be lost, that it's really well justified and that there really is no other option. But I'm hoping that at least a couple of them can be salvaged by giving this project the due diligence and the attention it deserves to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Happy to put the motion. Are those in favour?
Call for a division, Mr. Mayor.
The division is Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Mayor, Councillor Con, Councillor Thurley, Councillor King. Those against, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Vanderven and Councillor Cameron. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.5, consultation on New South Wales Office of Local Government draft social media and council staff interaction policies. Thank you, councillors. Councillor King. Councillor King, have you got your hand raised to put the motion? He's frozen. Councillor Thurley.
Sorry, I've got internet. I've got very slow internet here in my wilderness orphanage.
Okay, thank you. We'll wait for you to verbalise. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council endorses the submission as provided at attachment 4 to the New South Wales Office of Local Government in response to the draft model social media policy.
Thank you. Seconder, thanks. Councillor Stutchbury. Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to this?
Not particularly. We had an opportunity to have some input to it. I mean, I think in this day and age, it's something that's certainly needed to have a social media policy.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There being no further question or debate, apart from Councillor King, did you have anything to say or speak to Councillor King? Seeing you're still frozen. I think he's frozen in a lot of ways. Okay, happy to put the motion. Are those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.6, the public exhibition submissions for the companion animals management strategy. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor King. No? Okay. Mover, thank you, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to move the recommendation as the motion that Council A receives and notes the submissions received during the public exhibition.
Sorry, internet issues, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
2021 to 25 companion animal management strategy and adopts the draft 2021-25 companion animals management strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Doxey.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to speak to that at all?
Yes, very briefly. It was great. We had a couple of submissions and the staff have dealt appropriately with those submissions, acknowledging that people do have considerable concerns, as do I. However, as explained in the documentation, there are limitations to which we can confine certain animals and compel people to do certain things with their animals. So I think it's an appropriate response, and we're moving forward. It's an administrative matter otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. On that note, I'm happy to put the motion with note that Councillor King has disappeared off the screen. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Okay. CM 14 is officers' reports for noting, and we've got 14.1, the Albury-Wodonga Visitor Economy Trends Report. Councillor Gleichen?
Mr. Mayor, you've missed the items. The draft companion animals management strategy.
We just did that one, Councillor Vanderman. Did you?
Well, my internet must also be a problem.
Yeah, we've spoken to that one. It was voted on and the motion was carried.
I know. Thank you.
Councillor King, you've appeared again. How's it travelling now? No, he's frozen again. Okay. Councillor, did we move that
through you, Mr. Mayor,
No,
to move the recommendation as a motion? With reference to the, I'll just read it out. With reference to 14.1 Albury-Wodonga Visitor Economy Trends Report 2020, to move the recommendation as a motion that council receives and notes the 2020 Albury-Wodonga Visitor Economy Trends Report.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gleichen, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I'd like to make a few points. Clearly, there are some aspects of the report that we would prefer were a little different. However, there were some quite heartening components in the report, noting the period of that this report was written in. It's quite heartening to see that some of the numbers actually increased. Some of the expenditure actually increased as well. So I think we should look at this positively and think how fortunate are we in such circumstances, in such situation, that there has been growth in some areas, and we should support our local community and economy by saying that this is really positive, that in such difficult circumstances, some positive signs and growth were there, and ultimately that leads to a very good future, hopefully not too far away. It showed that whilst the international numbers were down, and it made reference to the fact that they didn't even take those or undertake data gathering in that category for obvious reasons, there were other categories that were positive, and a lot of that local tourism, that stay at home type holiday effect is having an effect. And clearly the government is undertaking a number of initiatives to try and enhance and encourage that visitor spend as well. So I thought it was on the whole, there were lots of positive things to take from this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gleichen. Any further speakers for or against? No? Okay. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.2, the 2 Cities 1 Community Action Plan 2021-2022. Councillor King. Oh.
Councillor Vanderman with the green thing.
Councillor King, can you speak or are you offline again? No, Councillor Vanderman, I'll default to you to move the motion. Thanks. Councillor King.
Is my internet working properly?
Yep, you're travelling well.
Recommendation, I'll move the recommendation of motion. The council receives the notice of 2 Cities 1 Community Operational and Strategic Action Plan for 2021-22.
Thank you. Councillor King, you back online?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
Sort of.
Can you hear me?
Sort of.
Okay, we'll move on to someone else. Councillor Thurley.
Sort of.
Councillor Gleichen.
Be somebody happy with that, wouldn't he?
Councillor Thurley, happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is, I know we're having some internet issues, but I think this is one of our more important decisions tonight in terms of the future for our 2C1C partnership with the City of Wodonga. So I really would strongly hope that all of our councillors see fit to endorse this operational and strategic plan as a way of moving forward with the 2 Cities 1 Community partnership that has been so important for our region over the last couple of years. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Any further speakers for or questions? No, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no delegates' reports for noting. Notice of urgent business. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given it was deemed irrelevant to be added to 13.2, hoping to separately move as urgent business that council officers prepare in consultation with local residents a plan to reduce speeds on, I had written surrounding streets, residential streets around Meat and Moore streets.
Mr. Mayor, this
plan be reported to
point
council
of
in
order.
greater than 6 months' time.
Point of order. Mr. Mayor. This does not need a motion. It's quite clear that our issues with this particular precinct is well known now to our councillors and to staff, and it does not need a motion to move this issue forward.
I think the motion has been put by Councillor Con, and I have a seconder, so I'm happy to accept it, Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Stutchbury.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cameron.
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe it's within our meeting code of practice to move substantive motions as items of urgent business.
Exactly right.
I think we're going to ask the staff. I think at the moment I'm happy to entertain the question, Councillor Cameron.
Well, you run the risk respectfully, Mr. Mayor, of conducting business other than in accordance with, as the Act requires, our meeting code of practice.
Thank you, filibuster. Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
Point of order.
The question you wish to raise was?
That is not a filibuster.
The motion calls for preparation of a plan and that plan be reported to councillors. I don't see that as a substantive decision.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ferris, I think it was noted before that you were happy to provide that information to council. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. As some of the speakers spoke today, our staff have had discussions with some of the locals there. We've commenced some further data collection with regards to traffic volumes and speeds in that area. Frauenfelder Street, you may have noticed, was on the Stop It or Cop It campaign as one of the streets identified by the local residents for speeding. So that campaign's up and running at the moment. The intent will be to bring a local area traffic management plan for that area back through our local traffic committee, and we'll provide them updates at each of the meetings, but over the next couple of meetings we'll finalise that. Any recommendations out of that will come back to council for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. I think that concludes that particular item. Thank you, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, sorry,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Cameron.
Sorry, I'm waiting for you to rule on my point of order. Was it in order or not?
Councillor Cameron, it was. I couldn't hear you properly. What was it?
My point of order was that I don't believe our meeting code of practice provides that we can move substantive motions as urgent and emergent business.
Well, it hasn't been moved, Councillor Cameron.
Well,
it was taken on advice. Your point of order was ruled on and no one has spoken to it.
Well,
it was agreed by Mr. Ferris that he would provide a report. And at
That's
the end
good.
of this discussion, I was happy to suggest to Councillor Con, if she feels a need to move it as a motion, she present it to the council staff as a motion for the next meeting. So thank you, Councillor Cameron, for assisting me to chair the meeting.
Well,
Councillor Vanderman, did you have an urgent?
Order, Mr. Mayor. This is
Councillor
not Wodonga Council where points of order are dismissed by the chairperson. We are bound by the code of meeting practice, and you have to rule on my point of order.
Councillor Cameron, I said I accepted your point of order and it wasn't put as a motion. I said that as I was speaking. If you actually use the two things on your head to listen, you would
My
hear
glasses.
that.
There's
Thank
no
you.
need to become abusive, really. I mean,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Vanderman, did you have an urgent item for business? Thank you.
No. I just wanted a question around what Councillor Cameron's asked really on the point of order. So thank you. You've made that abundantly clear now, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Are there any other council with any urgent business? No, there is no confidential matters. So I'm happy to close the meeting at 7:44. Thank you for your attendance.
Thanks. Thank you.